What's up, gamers? It's your boy, JKon. Welcome to another episode of Rostermania. Last episode, we covered all the moves that happened so far in Pacific, so today's video will be continuing that trend and looking at all the moves that have happened in America so far. If you missed the Pacific video, feel free to go check it out after watching this one. Next episode will cover EMEA, so stay tuned for that one. Now, without further delay, let's get into it. Let's start out with Latin America, as both Leviatán and KRU Esports have completed their rosters for 2024. Lev, excuse the pun, have built a Leviathan coming into the new year, straying away from their LATAM roots and going international. They have let both Takalia and Shyy leave the roster, and in their place have brought in Aspas and Tex. I think this is one of the best moves of the offseason, as Lev have brought in one of the best duelist players in the world to replace their weakest link throughout the year. Although Taco had a lot of great performances in the past, his 2023 did not inspire too much as he underperformed and seemed homesick. Aspas is probably the best person to fill the slot that was available, and I'm excited to see him in a new environment. Aspas had an incredible 2023, being the tip of the spear for Loud as they rebuilt from their championship roster and continued to have a lot of success. He was the best player in Americas throughout the year, and although his team did falter at Masters Tokyo, they were able to place top 3 at the other international events in the year. Aspas is an absolute monster, and his skill is undeniable. I think with him in a new environment, he will continue to be motivated to be one of the best and challenge for trophies. Get Aspas! The other signing is Tex, who will be taking over Shyy's role as Sentinel. I thought their announcement video for him was really funny, where they basically made fun of him for the fact that he can't speak Spanish or Portuguese and that he wasn't signed to play Duelist, but rather Sentinel instead. For those who don't know who Tex is, he was most recently the Duelist for the Guard and Challengers. He joined the Core for 2023 after Saya player left to join T1. He was an integral part for that roster to win Ascension and definitely has the skills to play in the Tier 1 league. Before his time on the Guard, he also played on NRG with Sam, Ethan, EU, and Hazed. He has primarily been a duelist main, but he has played Flash Initiators as well as Chamber in the past. Like I mentioned earlier, he will be taking Shyy's role, which was the Sentinel role throughout all of 2023. I think this is a completely fine move, as we've seen a lot of cracked aimers move over to the Sentinel role. I think with Killjoy still being extremely strong and most likely the dominant Sentinel, putting a strong fragger on her is not that much of a detriment, as her utility is not difficult to use. There are obviously differences between very experienced Killjoy players and non-experienced ones, but her floor is pretty high in my opinion, and she can definitely be workshopped. Examples of insane fraggers that are Sentinels are Alphayear, Boostio, Nats, and less. There are others that have transitioned to the role that have seen some success, like RB, Buzz, Shyy, Pankata, and Munchkin. Also, with Chamber being a possibility as a pick, that is an agent that Tex is very familiar with, as he did play that role throughout all of 2022 for NRG and was one of the best Chambers in the region. Tex is a fine pickup, and I think he'll be fine on his new role, and I'm more concerned for him adapting to a new environment as well as the team transitioning to a new language. Lev has a pretty good core for Aspas and Tex to join, and I think their system was a little too rigid last year, but with the new additions as well as revamping their coaching staff with bringing in Golked, who was the assistant coach of Koi this year, as their head coach, and Itopata, who was the head coach of Apex this past year, who went on to dominate their VCL league and almost won Ascension as their assistant coach. I think they will be a very good team coming into 2024 and should be vying for a top spot in the region. King is still an incredible fragger, but I'm not super sold on him being an IGL yet, but we don't know how much of the system was owners versus his, and I'm willing to see what he's got for this year with 2 upgrades coming to the roster. Besides maybe lacking in the calling department, King is definitely a shooter and he can frag with the best of them. Nauser has been a great initiator for the team throughout the year and has been pretty consistent. I did hear somewhere that his English isn't the best, so he might struggle to adapt to the new team environment, and being the initiated player, that might be an issue, but I still think he's quite good. Mazzino as their controller is their anchor and is a pretty solid player in my opinion. I think this core is quite talented, just their system last year was not good. This team can be a contender if they are able to handle the new additions as well as transitioning to an English-speaking roster. Speaking about Shyy as a cracked fragger, he has left Leviatán and joined his LATAM rival, KRU Esports. KRU unfortunately had a vacancy on their roster as Davies tragically passed away this year. Rest in peace, Davies, you will always be missed, and they have filled it with the very talented Shyy. Shyy will most likely continue his Sentinel role for this team, as like I mentioned earlier, he did play that role throughout all of 2023. Shyy also has a lot of experience on main Info Initiator, and in my opinion was one of the best in 2022. I think Shyy is one of the best Spanish-speaking players that KRU could have gotten, and unfortunately there isn't that large of a pool of talent to pick from, so getting one of the best is still a dub in my book. Shyy didn't have the greatest 2023 2023 as Leviatán ran out of gas early as the rest of the league figured them out, and they did not adapt enough. I think he can definitely have a bounce back year, and continuing in a Spanish-speaking environment is definitely a plus. KRU have also released Nagzet from the roster and have signed young duelist main MTA to take his place. Nagzet was one of KRU's consistently worst performers throughout the year, and although he did have moments where he would come up incredibly clutch, I thought he wasn't that good. He was definitely KRU's weak link throughout the year, and his time in tier 1 was limited in my opinion. I really don't know much about MTA other than he's 18 and he plays Jet and Raze. I think adding new young talent is always exciting, so I guess we'll just have to see how he performs on the big stage. With him being a duelist main, he might be pushing Kesnet towards a more supportive role if the team is not running double duelist, but I'm not too sure what each role they will be on. The core of KRU didn't have the greatest 2023, going winless until LCQ, where they were able to win it and make it to champions, but they went winless on the international stage. Kesnet is still an absolute beast, and he definitely deserves a spot in tier 1, so I'm happy to see him stay. Klaus didn't have the best year, so I'll be looking at him to bounce back, especially as the IGL reigns have been handed over to Melzer. Speaking of Melzer, he looked a lot better near the end of the year and definitely showed improvement. I don't think this team will be a title contender for sure, but I'm hoping that they will at least improve in the wins category this year. Like I said in my every VCT team's year in 3 words or less, go check it out if you haven't seen it already, I said that they were the best winless team, so they still have a lot of potential going into the future, especially with the additions of the new young talent. Vamos KRU! Vamo Brazil! We head over to South America's largest country as 2 of the 3 Brazilian organizations have completed their roster for 2024 and the 3rd has signed a few players. Let's start out with the org that has Brazil in their namesake, Made in Brazil. MIBR have done a partial rebuild, bringing in 2 new members in Mazin and Artzin, as well as filling out their coaching staff with reuniting Bazooka and Fraud, with the former taking the assistant coach role and the latter taking the head coach role. Mazin should be a familiar name if you have been watching VCT, but if you haven't, don't worry, I got your back. Mazin was formerly of FURIA and was a member of that organization since mid-2021. He would compete under their banner at back-to-back champions in 2021 and 2022, but would get eliminated in groups without a win both times. He would stay on the roster throughout 2023 in the franchise league and would play the Flash Initiator and Viper Harbor role throughout the year. He definitely did not have that great of a year, placing in the bottom 3rd in rating across all players in Americas in the regular season and LCQ. I wasn't very impressed with his gameplay overall, and I'm not super high on this pickup for MIBR. The second pickup joining the core of JZZ, FRZ, and RGL Meister is Artzin. Now, Artzin is a newcomer to the scene. He primarily played in Tier 2 of Brazil, with his most recent stint being on OO Nation this past year. He is a duelist main that can play both Jet and Raze, and he'll be coming in as the Heat replacement for this year. He put up decent numbers in the year as his team was able to place 7th and 8th in Split 1 and 2nd in Split 2. However, he did underperform during Ascension, being the worst rated player in the event as his team went out 5th 6th. He has a ton of potential though and has shown the capability to flex to other roles, but he is primarily a duelist. Overall, like I have said before, young talent is always nice to see, and this team definitely has some young talent, but I don't think that Artzin will be the difference maker to make this team good. MIBR is truly mid in Brazil in my opinion with these pickups. They also dropped Chosen, their legendary coach stand-in, who knifed Bang while he was defusing and set EG up for their championship run. I really like the fact that Fraud has joined the coaching staff, as him and Bazooka have had success together in the past, and maybe they can help guide this young group to some success, but I don't think they will get many wins this coming year. There is definitely always an argument to be made on how to build a roster, and only so many people can put together contenders. Ideally, you would want everyone to put together a contending roster, but that's not always the case. A perfect example of this would be the NBA. You have teams that are looking at rebuilds like the Portland Trailblazers, the San Antonio Spurs, and Detroit Pistons, and you have teams that are looking to contend like the Denver Nuggets, Phoenix Suns, and Milwaukee Bucks. There are going to be top teams vying for trophies, and there are going to be teams that look to develop talent and are just happy to be there. I don't expect too much out of this roster at the end of the day, but they have been participating in some third-party events recently, one being the multi-platform esports game 2023 event, and we've gotten to see them in action. Artzin has been on Duelist, JZZ on Initiator Flex with Mazin, RGL Meister on Controller, and of course FRZ on Sentinel. I'm not sure who the IGL is on this roster, and they aren't world beaters yet, but they do show some potential. The only major disappointment that I have is that they all don't have matching names, and RGL Meister needs to rebrand. Artzin is definitely talented, and FRZ has picked up some form from last year, so hopefully we'll see some signs of life for them in 2024. Let's go to the next Brazilian organization that have announced their roster for 2024, FURIA! I really liked their announcement video that they did. It was a little cheesy with all the members doing a police lineup, but I enjoyed the fact that they were singing about FURIA. Very cool. Speaking of those members, they have MW Zera, Conan, and Khalil remaining from their 2023 roster, and I've added 2 duelist mains from Tier 2 Brazil in Liazzi and Havoc. They have stated that their plan was to add 2 young talents and mold them into better players and maybe a new role, very similarly to what Lao did this past year with Artzin and Tuyz. Liazzi played for Vivo Key this past year and put up absolute numbers in Challengers Brazil. He was the highest rated player in Split 1, putting up a 1.24 rating and 247 ACS over 31 maps. He cooled off a little in Split 2, but still was a top 20 player in the league. He will be transitioning over to the controller role for this new roster, as we have gotten to see them in action in the same tournament MIBR is participating in. The other player they signed is a little more well known, as Havoc made a name for himself playing for the Union throughout 2023, putting up huge numbers for his team as they were able to win both splits of Challengers and being the best player in Split 1 and a top 5 player in Split 2. He left the team before LCQ as he was screaming with Loud as they were going through some drama with Aspas, but he ended up not joining them. He is getting his shot in Tier 1 joining this FURIA team, and he will be taking over the Flash Initiator role for them. He's absolutely cracked and has incredible aim, definitely deserving a shot at Tier 1, and I'm really happy that FURIA brought in new talent. They've shown pretty good performances in the multi-platform esports game event, making it all the way to the grand finals with absolute dominant performances from MW Zera, who has returned to the duelist role. The GOAT is back! Have you seen his raised DM stats? Wyatt Truthers rejoice as our GOAT has returned. Again, I don't think this roster will be a world beater, but I think they might be competitive with the overall league. I'm excited to see young talent, especially as there was a point that QCK, a former FURIA member, made about how Brazil doesn't really bring in new talent and recycles the same old players over and over again. They also brought in Liazzi's coach from Vivo Key Koi as the head coach to lead this squad, who saw success last year, placing 2nd in Split 1 and 4th in Split 2. The final Brazilian roster that I want to talk about is Loud, as they have been able to retain their core from last year, re-signing Sadak, Les, and Artzin for 2024. I think this is great news, as Les is one of the best players in the world, and Sadak is a top 3 IGL in the world, and with him at the helm of any project, I am confident in his ability to lead them to be contenders. Loud have lost another member of their champions winning roster, as Aspas has departed to Leviatán, and Saucy and Pancata of course left the Sentinels last year. Losing Aspas is definitely a really huge hit overall. Like I said during the Leviatán portion, he is one of the best players in the world and is pretty much irreplaceable. Sadak has said that when looking to rebuild this roster, they did not want to find a 1-for-1 for Aspas because he's near impossible to replace, so they are looking for another player that fits their system and can be more flexible. Fraud has also departed the roster and has joined MIBR like I mentioned earlier. Sadak and Les as a duo immediately make you a top contender in my eyes. Les is so insane and his crisp aim is just a beauty to watch. He's incredibly intelligent as a player and is more than capable of taking over the game for his team. Sadak has proven time and time again that he's one of the best IGLs that Valorant has seen, and going from winning champions in 2022 to rebuilding with rookies and taking that roster to a top 2 finish at Lock-In and a top 3 finish at Champions while absolutely dominating Americas and setting the meta throughout the year is insanity. Sadak is extremely flexible with his role and is selfless to make sure his teammates are comfortable, and he can click heads pretty damn well. Tuyz is also rumored to re-sign with the team, giving them 4/5 of their roster from 2023 and are rumored to sign QCK as their 5th. I think Tuyz and Artzin developed a lot over the past year. The latter definitely started taking off more near the end of the year, and Tuyz got more consistent throughout. I'm happy to see both of these young talents stay, as they were Loud's project from last year and performed quite well for being rookies. They were top contenders in the region and the world, and their continued development will help propel this roster forward. I personally really like QCK as a player. He has shown a lot of flexible capabilities in the past and throughout 2023 on FURIA, where he played primarily the Sentinel role but flexed to Duelist and Harbor. I think he can easily fill the Duelist role for the squad. He's definitely not an Aspas, but he's still pretty good in my book. He did transition to a new role last year as DG Zin was the main Duelist for FURIA, but I think that added flexibility is what Loud are looking for, and this team will still be really good. Overall, the core that has re-signed is one of the best in Americas and the world, and I would expect them to continue to be a top contender. They may not find as much success as they have had in the past 2 years, as losing Aspas' firepower is really big, but they can adapt their game to adjust for that. They should be vying for playoffs in their region and at international events if they make it there, and I'm excited to see how this team will pan out and what magic Sadak will have this year. The last franchised Americas team that I'll cover today is the new look Cloud9. If you haven't seen my retrospective on KS9, go check it out after this video. Cloud9 have rebuilt their roster from 2023, bringing in the core of G2's 2023 Valorant team of Oxy, Whippy, and Coach Immy. They've also re-signed Vanity to the roster to lead this team with Zeppa and Jake still remaining from last year. I actually don't hate this roster at all, and I think they have a lot of underrated pieces. G2 had a good start to 2023, topping their group in challengers going 4-1, and just falling short of the trophy at the mid-season face-off to M80 3-1. They would then take a nosedive in Split 2 as they would go winless in their group and finish in 11th place with only a +6 round differential on DSG, the worst team in challengers. Luckily for them, they had enough points to qualify for playoffs and avoided relegation, but their run would not last very long as they lost 2-0 to Oxygen Esports and dropped to lowers where they would face Shopify Rebellion. They would win that matchup 2-1, but once again would get 2-0'd, this time by the guard, and their year would be over. Oxy showed a lot of potential on that roster, but as a whole, they did struggle with 2 members role swapping, one of which was Whippy. Whippy definitely struggled on the controller role, but joining Cloud9 as their sentinel player, his main role, will definitely give him a boost and he'll be looking at a bounce back year. I've always been a fan of Zeppa and Vanity, so them reuniting is nice to see. Jake developed a ton over the last year and showed potential to be one of the best controllers in the region. To give a little context on how this roster was put together, it actually stemmed from the previous member who has switched teams from blue to red like I do when I get auto balance in TF2, Zelsis. Zelsis spoke about how in the offseason he was given the reins to build the roster and be the IGL. He chose players that have all had experience with one another, with Oxy, Whippy, and Immy playing together in G2, the latter two in version 1 with Zelsis himself and Vanity. Zelsis ended up leaving the roster to join Sentinels for his personal brand and chose Vanity as his replacement because of that aforementioned connection and the fact that Vanity played for C9 in the past as well with Zeppa. I think in terms of chemistry and familiarity, this was a pretty good attempt at putting together a roster. We'll just have to see how they click coming together into the new year and how much Oxy and Jake can continue to develop. We've gotten to see this team in action so far as they've been traveling around the world participating in show matches such as the Red Bull Double Agent hosted by Ludwig versus MXS and the 10 Global Invitational in South Korea, winning both of these events. The roles look pretty solid with Oxy on Duelist, Zeppa on Flex, Vanity on Initiator Flex, Jake on Controller, and Whippy on his aforementioned Sentinel. They looked solid at the event with the newcomers popping off, but of course these were show matches and some of them were best of ones, so I won't take this too seriously. I think this team has a lot of potential and people might be sleeping on them. I don't think they are necessarily contenders, but they definitely can vie for a playoff spot. The final team from Americas that I want to talk about doesn't play in tier 1 yet, but a team I'm a fan of nonetheless, Moist x Shopify or MXS. MXS is a new team coming into the scene, combining the forces of Moist Moguls and Shopify Rebellion. Moist Moguls, if you don't know, is Ludwig and Charlie's Valorant team that is the brainchild of combining their organizations Moist Esports and Mogul Moves, picking up the roster of Sim, Thief, Brock, Flyer, and a Proto, coached by Tani. They were originally Breakthrough, a free agent roster that made it into challengers in 2023. They were picked up in February after week 2 of Split 1 and were able to place second in their group behind G2. They went on to beat TSM 2-0 in the playoffs, but would suffer back-to-back losses from M80 and G2, 2-1 and 2-0 respectively, as they were eliminated from the tournament. In Split 2, the team really came together and had a perfect 5-0 record in the group stage, sweeping their first 2 playoff matchups against TSM and the Guard. They would then fall 2-0 to M80 and have a rematch against the Guard in the lower finals, but they unfortunately went out 3-0 and in 3rd place, missing out on attending Ascension. Coming into 2024, Ludwig and Charlie have combined forces with the behemoth of Shopify Rebellion, mixing their rosters together and creating a new team, MXS. Shopify Rebellion has been a huge name in the scene for quite a while, with one of the best Game Changers teams, and have had a male roster since August of 2022. They originally entered this scene picking up Luminosity's roster before NA's LCQ, but were unable to win a map. In 2023, they would participate in challengers and would place last place in their group in Split 1, going 1-4. In Split 2, they would find more success as they would place 3rd in their group, going 3-2 and qualifying for playoffs after adding Vanity to the roster. They wouldn't progress very far as they would lose 2-0 to M80 and 2-1 to G2, ending their year. With the two teams combining, the new roster is Brock, Flyer, and Thief from MXM, and Mata and Vic from Shopify. This roster has a ton of potential, and as I've already been a fan of the core, adding 2 young crack players that work well with the team just makes my excitement for them to go higher. I've been a Vic truther for a long time, so I'm happy to see him join a core that has seen success, and I look forward to his growth. Mata is a fine pick, and although I really like B-Dog, he already has been released from Shopify. Mata has a little bit more flexibility than B-Dog and is able to play Neon as well as KO. Overall, this team is a bunch of cracked young aimers with content creators that I like backing them. I can't not support them. They've been participating in show matches and third-party events recently, so we've gotten to see them in action. They were able to win their matchup against Sentinels 2-1, who got to experience the Proctagon, so I definitely have high hopes for this team. I'm optimistic that they will make waves and challenges this year, but their competition will be tough again. I love what Tuyz and Ludwig have been doing for the scene, and I think more content creators entering the space can help it grow. A great example of this already happening are orgs like KRU Core, Loud, and Gentlemates to an extent. KRU Core threw an event where they had 28,000 people attend, where they had show matches with all of their teams. Loud have huge reach and have some of the highest social interactions on their social media, as well as have ride or die type of fans. They represented Loud throughout the regular season in LA, as well as during Champions, and during League of Legends Worlds this year, Loud fans were loud as ever, excuse the pun, during play-ins. Gentlemates is an org of French content creators that came together and now have a team that won EMEA Ascension this year. I think the future of esports isn't as bad as people make it out to be, and I think more content creators entering the space can help lead us to a new era. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about all of these roster moves happening in Americas. Do you think Aspas and Leviatán will be immediate contenders after putting together a super team? Do you think the Brazilian teams put together competitive enough rosters? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. If you like this video, consider checking out this video right here where I talk about the moves that happened so far in Pacific. Stay tuned for the EMEA roster video coming out next. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay hydrated. Peace.